Hey everyone, welcome back to my heavily modded XCOM 2 campaign one last time for a post-campaign discussion. Here's the victory screen for that campaign. It's a little bit wrong, like 134 missions. One, I had to do console commands when I was troubleshooting. I'll get more into that later at the very end. So there's probably like 10 more missions in there than there really should be. It was probably more like 120. I'm surprised to see that missions lost in World is an average of 0. That's very funny. I figured 1 was like really low, and then I looked over here. Also, the normal campaign, obviously much shorter than a Covert Infiltration campaign. I assume this is comparing Legend to Legend. Flawless missions is like double, but so is campaign length, so that's average. Now, aliens killed, on the other hand, is not doubled, it's quadrupled. That makes me feel good. It means that even though I've increased my squad size by 33%, I've also literally doubled alien count, which should be more impactful. Soldiers lost 37. That definitely includes like mind control people and mimic beacons. We'll get the real number in a little while. I think it's like 6. It's like maybe 8, something similar to that, which also means that I had far less deaths per mission on average then. Successful shot percentage is a little bit higher than world average, but I think that's like the same thing that's showing in turn timer here, where I'm like way lower than average. I think my playstyle is just a lot slower and more meticulous than most people. In these past few episodes, I've had several times where I'm just like, I'm gonna just sit down and wait, because there's not a timer. And even when there is a timer, I've still sort of got that attitude. Of course, everyone kills all 3 Chosen. Who wants to show up to Waterworld with less gear and more bosses to fight? Days to kill first Chosen, I was really far behind on, apparently. Kills by faction heroes. Yeah, that checks out. About doubled, which is about the amount that enemies are. About doubled if you were to double theirs, I mean. If you double this to account for having half as many missions, then it's about half. Global ability points earned. World average negative 400, huh? I'm gonna guess that there are some people in the world doing really fucky shit distorting the average, or that's just broken. Cause that ain't right. I suspect my global ability points earned is a much higher than average though, on account of AP farming, and then another mod where killing enemies like Grift Keepers gives you ability points. It's like you got to the end of the game, play with ability points, it makes it fun. I'm surprised to see I've only roughly doubled covert actions completed since I did like basically all of them, and my missions, not my missions, my campaign was like twice. Oh wait, no, I had like twice as many missions, but that's because of Covert Infiltration. My campaign's probably of similar length, so some combination of the two there. Number of level 3 soldier bonds was 2, which is apparently the normal. And apparently most people get way more breakthroughs research than me. One thing I was thinking about is the number of mod added autopsies I had to do and the number of like bridging texts maybe probably meant that I had less in-game research. It's probably why the campaign went so long, because I was spending time doing other things that mods added. Yeah, that checks out. Soldiers is all action, tremendously more. Although this should be 109. I pointedly skipped over exactly how much troubleshooting I had to do. I don't remember if I specified this. 4 of those soldiers are Black Cat, Sonic Serenade, Black Cat again, and Sonic Serenade again. So 2 of them are doppelgangers I had to create for the final mission, because there was literally no way to remove Solace from the soldier, so I had to recreate them as best I could. Days to first Colonel? Yeah, that checks out, because I had the experience nerfs in effect by then. I want to say that in like episode 20, I had a Colonel when I spark rushed super hard without the experience nerfs, and that was the impetus for me adding the experience nerfs, which were honestly just gross overkill, and I think I wanted slower experience, but at the same time, like it's a problem with Sparks being able to get so much experience in Covert Infiltration. There's really no way around it, and trying to nerf everyone's experience to fix that isn't a good solution. Tremendously more promotions earned. That checks out with my massively lost. Did we crash? No, the game just decided it wanted to minimize. Where was I? Oh, promotions earned. Yeah, we have a massively higher roster size and far more missions. This makes sense that it's tripling them. Number of colonels is doubled. That checks out. I thought it was really surprising. I think this is actually 21, again, fake units. But it makes sense that this is so much higher. It felt really high. This is actually a 4, more like a 3.2 if you count Big Larch as being barely a Scion. It checks out that it would normally be 2 though, because like when I played base game, as soon as those Scions were done, you weren't making more Scions. Those were the Scions. They were coming on every mission. You didn't have time to make more. What the hell is a Magi? I don't have any, so I don't know what it is. Oh. I'm gonna guess Magi is the highest rank of Scion, and most people will get half their Magi, half their Scions, 2 Magi, I mean. Hack rewards earned, I'm doing better? Oh. I have twice as many missions and twice as many hack rewards, which also means the rest of the world is basically never getting towers either. Good to know I'm not the only one bad about it. I'm surprised at how little robot hacking I got to do. It felt like my units were either able to kill them instantly with combat protocol or unable to affect them with Haywire. That felt like where the balance was at, and I really didn't enjoy it. You'd have to be specifically a unit that could be shut down but couldn't be otherwise dealt with efficiently. And that would usually mean like a super heavy mech, but with super heavy mechs, it'd be like, oh, but they're in the middle of a pod, you use an explosive to hit the whole pod and shred them, and now you can deal with them, and shutting them down feels weird. I found hacking robots to be surprisingly not that good in this campaign compared to my memory of it. Why does the average person have 11 engineers? What the fuck are you doing with them? What? Like, if it said 9, I'd get it. That would mean they just didn't build a workshop and they had the engineers inside the gremlins. What's the 11th guy even manning? Days to mag weapons is a bit slower for me, but because of the bridging tech, that makes sense. Days to beam weapons was horribly slow for me. But also, because of the bridging weapons, or the bridging techs rather, I didn't care at all. Because even once I had beam weapons, I didn't use them, like, really at all outside the chosen weapons until I got the bridging tech. I got plated armor way ahead of the average. Why? I got them before mag weapons. What was the point of that? They must have gotten inspired, and I knew mag weapons wouldn't be a huge upgrade. That's my only guess. And then about 30 days behind on powered armor. But also, if you look at these, normally people go beam weapons powered armor because of bridging techs. I did it the other way around. Roughly the same gap between those as well. Days to alien encryption, I was a little bit ahead on that story progress. I wouldn't have this many radio relays. I think I built 2 or 3 of them while I was fixing things. I'll get into that in a second. Alien facility sabotaged again. Wait. I did like 8. I know I only did 4 on video, but I had to do like 4 more to stave off the end of the game to troubleshoot and rebuild those units over time. I'm not sure. Maybe this doesn't include the VIP missions. I'm not really sure why this says 4. But anyway, the actual number I did before troubleshooting was 4, which was the same as the average. This number's wildly out of line. I had to just wait for months and months and months with like the whole world owned for my Scions to train back up to where they were supposed to be because I was making the doppelgangers. I've got no idea what the original number was. Supplies earned from black market is very high. It was the majority of my income. This is also massively inflated for the same reason. I basically spent the whole time at Reaper HQ. Intel paid to black market's way higher, and supplies earned from black market is like, I don't know, why would that be a negative 1700? On the whole, all of those stats feel about like how I'd expect them to be. Fun to look at though. For the rest of this video, I'll be recording ideas pretty intermittently. I'll have a thought, think, oh, that should go in the video. I'll sit down and I'll record it, and then I'll arrange them as I think makes most sense in the video. However, first, let's get into this one. We were just talking about stats. Let's look at the stats from Soldier Lifetime Stats. And first, I want to just quickly click through these and figure out who was the best at various things. And I'm going to give that to you before we go through. To give us ourselves an idea, like, is 1086 damage a lot? How much shred do people normally do? And these are obviously going to be the stats from before Waterworld, since I can't go back and look at them. As a quick heads up, though, I won't really be paying much attention to things like lucky percent or average hit percent. Average hit percent on Cross Soldiers tells you more about how I play. Lucky percent is interesting, but aside from specifically looking at a soldier to see if my cognitive bias is right about something or not, I really don't care that much. And in this case, like, oh yeah, 40.1 lucky, you're really lucky in the 3 shots you took in your whole career. So like the most extremes are also just the ones with the smallest sample size. It doesn't really mean anything. The very first thing I checked, White Wolf still has the most days spent in the infirmary at 44. They haven't been wounded in such a long time, but no one ever caught up with them. Technically, Fiber Giant was in the infirmary for 48 days. The difference is that Fiber Giant does his job when he's in the infirmary, whereas White Wolf was supposed to be the Marine that I relied on. They were supposed to be what Dark Horse became, but they just wouldn't get out of the infirmary, and I think they were a sergeant who had almost no aim stacking in the 4th month. And I was like, dude, I guess you're just not going to be on the A-team. It seems like the way the wind's blowing. This makes my brain very happy. The best hit streak in XCOM was Regal Dawn at 100 on the money. Second place wasn't even close. There's somebody at like 40, I want to say it was like Seething Orca, who was obviously doing it against Lost. There are a couple 33s like Iron Rhino and Sun Soldier, both got 33, which is pretty neat. But yeah, and also, just the way I play this character class is so meticulous. 92.5 is the average hit percent of shots I launch on this Reaper. Let me quickly go check what the other one looks like. 95.1, even more meticulous, and they somehow underperformed. Also, it's closer than I thought it was, because this Reaper got up to 77. If you never take bad shots, I guess Reapers tend to get pretty high hit streaks, huh? Now, unfortunately, there's no chance for anyone to compete with Synth Soldier when it comes to most shots fired. Even Carbon Mile is only around 200, just because he's going on every mission. You can't possibly compete. However, I will see what the highest biological unit was. It's pretty close. Draugr takes it at 197. Apparently, historically, an unlucky character doesn't feel like it with their 60 hit streak. The worst miss streak they ever had was 3. Unlucky. Yeah, if you say so, buddy. But Regal Dawn has fired 171 shots, checks out with how many they landed in a row. Surprising 102 shots on Sword Saint, that's entirely lost, no chance it's not. And Dark Horse, because obviously they should be in the running, is at 176, historically actually lucky. It looks like there's not something to check for the number of Overwatch shots taken, so I won't be able to check that. Now when it comes to damage dealt, just like number of shots taken, I expect that robots are going to win. Synth Soldier, or sorry, Fiber Giant sitting here at 4567, which is a really aesthetically pleasing number. But I will go see like what the highest biological unit is. You can see Sword Saint's only at 1200. 3462 damage on Carbon Mile. 5,000 on Synth Soldier. Golly gee, that sure is a lot. So I thought it was going to be Dark Horse at 1818. That's a really high number. However, they did manage to lose, and I think you might know who to. It's the man himself, Depressed Draugr, coming in at just under 2,000, which is still not even half of any of the Sparks. However, if you check the number of missions they've gone on, I think that could be an interesting number. So at 28 missions, 1957 damage, Depressed Draugr dealt an average of 70 damage per mission, which is actually just under Dark Horse's average of 82, since they ended up going on substantially less missions than Draugr did. I can't tell you how many missions Fiber Giant has been on. He is not interested in revealing that information. Never ask a Spark their age. Synth Soldier's not much more forthcoming with that information. I think I can see it from another page though, right? Isn't missions on here somewhere? Yeah, 23. So Fiber Giant's been on 70 missions. And in those 70 missions dealt 4567 damage. Coming out to 65 damage per mission. That's good, because if it were higher, that would be incredibly fucked considering how much more durable he is than those other units. The fact that he's even close is outlandish, because those are some of the best, most damaging units XCOM has, and the tank is almost at the same level. The tank with the nerfed Kinetic Shrike Gauntlet, the nerfed Into the Ground Incinerator. For those who never saw my previous testing campaign, it only went for like 30 episodes. This thing's range was literally over twice as long and 50% wider. I would ambush pods by just hitting the entire pod with the Incinerator. It was fucking nuts. Now, Synth Soldier's been on 64 missions. And with a lifetime damage of 4986, that actually only comes out to be 77 damage. Well, really 80, it rounds up. But still, it's a little bit lower than my best biological units. What's going to be different is the shred number at 430. Dark Horse has dealt 106 shred damage. Depressed Draugr's dealt 82. The difference is that these guys deal a lot of damage and they shred a little bit, but Synth Soldier uses Overdrive to fire 2 Shred Storm Cannons in 1 turn and then rapid fire a shredding gun. Like, in terms of shredding units, I was reliant on Infiltrators, and it really shows. Nothing else in my roster comes remotely close to what Synth Soldier was doing. The funny thing is that when you look at the damage taken, like, it doesn't tell you half the story, because most of the reason this is, yeah, mitigated by armor 316. What you don't see here, I can't find a stat for it. Let me make sure I'm not blind. There is not a stat for numbers of shots dodged, which is why this number of damage taken is so low. The number of shots fired at Synth Soldier, roughly 45% of them were dodges, which is incredibly important. It's why he wasn't spending the entire campaign in the infirmary. It's because he was able to dodge and mitigate the rest with armor. Alright, so that's it for the discussion of stats. I want to move on to some troubleshooting that went into Waterworld. First, I'm going to talk about Solace. It was the culprit for my campaign being unplayable in Waterworld. The first time I went in there, I had 4 units with with Solace, the culprit. Every single one of my Scions had gotten a hold of Solace. And what happens, essentially, is that every time any unit moves, every single tile it moves, it checks to see if Solace is affecting it. It doesn't matter which team it's on or how far away it is from Solace. So every time anything moved, it'd be a 5-second delay. At first, this was a 5-second 0 FPS complete stop. Exit Sign helped out, got me a private version of the Highlander that fixes that issue, but it was like a cursed monkey paw wish, where now I watched in smooth 60 FPS as I clicked, it made the "you did a move" command, the little click sound effect, and then 5 seconds of idle animations later, they would run over. It was bizarre. And eventually, the modding Discord helping me out, Tedster in particular was able to be like, "Oh, you narrowed it down to Scions? How much Solace do you have on that mission?" And that was it immediately. He knew that it was coded in a bad way that was infamous for causing lag, and some other people pointed out later he was just the one at the time. Apparently this is semi-common knowledge, and I'm just tripping face first into like the most extreme exaggerated version of this glitch possible. But yeah, I had to spend a good like 6 hours getting from literally can't play the game to monkey paw version of lag to narrowing it down through trial and error to psionics, and then people could tell me that was Solace. And then once I did, if I were running any other version of psionics in the game, problem solved. Rebuild the soldier, take out the gem, whatever. There's a solution for everything else. But rebuild selected soldier stats doesn't affect this. As far as I can tell, there's no console commands to rebuild this or to remove specifically this ability. So what can I do? Well, for my, my Templar, I never got it through psionics. I had gotten this ability. So I was able to rebuild the soldier, which, fun fact, set his psi to 0. Didn't notice that the first time I launched Waterworld after I fixed it. So I had to come back and use a console command to set his psi back to 149, but that fixed it for the Templar. For Big Large, they hadn't learned it yet in my save before Waterworld, so I just told them to stop training that shit. But for Black Cat and Sonic Serenade, they already had it. I couldn't do that solution for them. So since they had to get back through the psionics tree, the only real solution I had was to hire rookies, change their name, like load the stuff from character pool to make them look mostly like Black Cat and Sonic Serenade, change the things that didn't automatically change, like their face and their accent and their backstory to match. I don't think I needed to do that, I was just being thorough. Then I needed to set their class, promote them to max level. I was able to do all that with console commands. I was able to form bonds with console commands. However, I don't know of a console command to increase the level of bond, so I didn't mention in the previous video, but they were just level 1 bond partners. I couldn't be bothered to try to get that going back up. And then what I did is I would use console commands like kill all AIs and teleport to cursor to immediately finish every mission I had to do to let time progress as they retrained these new characters through the Psi pool. They weren't psionics initially. There is a command to force someone to be a Scion that comes with Psi Overhaul v3. So that was helpful, but not quite the command I needed just to get rid of Solace or to rebuild the Scion. So I had to go through like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divided by 2, like 3 supply drops of stopping covert ops that were going to be a problem because of the dark event they allowed into Waterworld, or other things like that of defeating alien fortresses. That took me like an hour and a half to get through all of that, rebuild everything roughly correctly. And they weren't identical. I think they generally they would fail to get minor abilities. Like I think I might have missed Soulstorm on Black Cat or something. They probably both got Phase Walk and Schism, and I think one of them got Sustain, because they just kept rolling abilities that weren't on the previous tree, and it took so much time that I could not be asked to get it exactly the same, because it really didn't matter. But at the end, we were able to eventually recreate those soldiers and get into the mission. Going forward, I'm actually planning on switching to Psionics Ex Machina, so that just won't be a problem there. But I'm going to make a change before my next campaign in my tweaks mod. I don't know why that fully left. I want to go to soldier abilities. I already have some ideas, like adding Shredder over Splinter to Marines that I want to implement. I'm just going to replace Solace with something else. I don't know or care what. I don't want my mod setup to allow me to get Solace, and I don't want other people to get Solace and then have laggy missions and wonder why it's happening. So until such a time as someone finds a solution to Solace being a laggy nightmare of an ability, I just straight up don't want it in my game. Like, to the point that if I can figure out how to do it via INI easily, I will probably just remove the Solace gem outright from Psionics Ex Machina to avoid dealing with it. And that's like extreme and unnecessary because you can easily remove it, and theoretically you can easily remove this with console commands. But if something's that broken, I don't want it in my game, and that's a smooth transition to another thing I troubleshot for Waterworld. I say I troubleshot this, but really I just did it a couple of times to confirm that it's repeatable, and I can't troubleshoot that. I'm not a coder. I don't know why this happens, but it's fucked. You saw it if you watched the Waterworld video. Armed intervention against Venators using the feedback explosion against Scions just breaks the game. Like, you can't do anything. Skip AI doesn't work. Kill unit doesn't work. You can't do anything. You just have to load a save. It just hangs forever. You can put it on triple speed and go for a 30-minute walk. It'll be hung when you get back. You'll still be watching the Venator rave. So it's deeply frustrating for me. And I don't know if it's a bug with Venators or armed intervention. I'm inclined to believe it's Venators. And the reason for that is because Venators have some other weird behavior. Things where, what's it called? When they're supposed to clone when you shoot them, if you shoot them with a shredding gun, it only shreds the clone. If you shoot them with black ice rounds, it only infects the clone and fails to prevent the cloning in the first place. And I would assume that whatever's wrong in the code causing those interactions is the exact same thing causing armed intervention to not work and just hang your game against specifically Venators. Now, I could remove Venators. That's a potential solution, and they do seem a bit buggy. I'm going to post a bug report after I finish recording this segment of the video about armed intervention and shredding behavior and black ice rounds and all that stuff. However, that's not my solution, because I have a problem with field medics. I don't like them. It's that simple. I don't like field medics. They have this big Overwatch tree, don't they? Where is it? Well, they have this big Overwatch theme, right? With field medics, it's just sort of a random armed intervention with a ton of Overwatch abilities down here in the pool of AWC perks. But it's the same thing with field supports, actually. Except now it's just made into a proper tree up here at the top with Kill Zone, which in my opinion is the sort of perk that shouldn't be in Proficiency class pack. I think Laser Sparks shouldn't have had a lot of abilities they had, like Restoration Protocol and Rapid Fire. And Kill Zone is in the same boat, where it's a vanilla ability that's too strong for Proficiency class pack. Admittedly, it's on a character with bad aim progression. But my solution to this is not to, like, try to fix this myself, because I don't know how to code. That's beyond me. I can make I&I edits, and I think I'm clever and good at balancing games, but I cannot code, and I'm not particularly interested in learning to code, unfortunately. At least not at this moment. So my solution is to edit some I&Is. See, since I'm not happy with field medics in general, and I think this tree is the worst part of the field support, because, like, it has 75 base aim. I was aim stacking on this soldier, and with the superior aim PCS and aim stack, I got to 100, which means I think I got to 80, right? Because you should have the personal combat sim in currently. Oh, you don't? Why did it say you had 100 aim a second ago? Was I looking at the wrong stats? Now it says you have 104. Maybe you had an advanced aim PCS in, I don't know. But since it's 20 lower than this, that soldier actually has like 84 aim after going on a couple of aim stack missions. That's not good. So yeah, you can build and gear this character to function as an Overwatch character, but it's obviously not best played that way. It's not the most interesting version of the character, and medics have the same thing going on. But the funny thing about medics is when you look at their tree and ask how many of these abilities involve being a medic, well, like medical specialist and triage, absolutely very important to being a medic. Those are base things they get. Emergency aid kind of involves being a medic. Advanced trauma kits is obviously very in theme for healing people. Combat stimulants, hell yeah. To a lesser degree, anti-venom stems, although I'm afraid that it works the same way Solace does and makes your game laggy, so I don't know that I want to include it in my game. And applied knowledge is technically medical related. That's good enough for this class, it's good enough for me. And if you'll notice, aside from the stuff that should be baseline proficiency feats, I listed about one tree worth of abilities just now. I'm one ability short, admittedly. So it's convenient there's one medical ability over here in Bandage Throw that needs to be moved to the new medical tree that'll replace the Overwatch tree in my next campaign. In my next campaign, I'm going to Frankenstein together the field support and the field medic. And the way I'm planning on doing this is by altering the field support and then disabling the field medic. So I don't know if I can actually do this part of the plan where you just cram more abilities down into the bottom pass where you're visibly able to see them, but my plan is to make these changes. The spotter tree, in my opinion, is perfect and doesn't need any changes. The support tree is getting shuffled around a little bit. I'm having low profile come over to that tree. I'm moving support grenadier up from the deck. And other than that, it's basically the same tree. Bandage Throw comes down to medic. They get some new blue abilities from medics here. They keep anti-venom stems. And because I'm losing a couple abilities here, I don't think fire support and combat awareness are really super in line with the identity that I want if I'm completely cutting Overwatch from it. And Support Grenadier feels like a core thing. I needed an ability here, and it seemed very relevant. So since I had a deck of 5 and 4, I added heavy hardpoint to the second deck, as it's like a strong thing that feels kind of in line with Support Grenadier and Total Combat. I don't really know what it should be, but this is my like immediate plan that I came up with when I was troubleshooting Waterworld and realized I was doing the thing with the Venator. I was like, what if I just smashed Field Medic and Field Support together? And that doesn't fix the problem with Armed Intervention, but it removes Armed Intervention from the game by removing both of the Overwatch trees. It fixes my problem with Medic, because Medics don't do anything, by combining them with Field Supports that also don't do anything but feel really important while they're not doing anything. And it fixes my problem with Field Supports of being a support unit that's not a Medic, making it really hard to fit a Medic on the team and feel like I'm proactive enough. Because now they are the Medic. I don't need to fit a Medic on the team. So I really like this idea, and something else I like is condensing classes down. It's why I'm removing Assault from my next campaign instead of playing with Assaults and Phalanxes, because I could try out the Shield Assaults. The main reason I'm not quite sure if I want to play with Blutengel is because, well, if I'm playing with another class that's doing the same thing, they're both melee tanks, the Phalanx and the Blutengel, then I don't know if I'm going to be able to show off both of them. I don't know if I'm going to be able to actually use them both in reasonable amounts, because realistically, if the role of the class is the same, then one of them is probably wrong to use in the given mod setup, in the given circumstance, right? So I would rather, instead of having a situation where in-game I stop using one of the classes, just only play with one for the role. It's not that either class seems more well-made than the other, it's that Blutengel's just more out there, so Phalanx is the one that I look at and I grok way easier, and I think, you know, maybe I don't even want to play with Proxians, I'm going too hard into crazy shit. What if we just tone back the power? And I look at Blutengel, I'm like, there's a lot of text in that. That might be balanced, but I don't want to think about it. And I'm getting off topic right now, but the point of that was that I don't like having multiple classes serving the same role. It makes it hard to have all your classes be relevant to the campaign, because you'll have like a biotank in 3 different classes. And now, rather than having 6 assaults and people see assaults all the time, you have like a different flavor of biotank on every mission, and I don't really feel like I get a great showing out of any one class that way. And as I've been showing you Word documents about mod plans, I'm going to go over the random notes I've gotten progressively less organized. This used to be for things I should say at the start of a video to remind myself of like what I need to do and what topics we were talking about. It just stopped being that at some point. There were build plans for character classes. Just deleted that at some point when I was like, wait a second, I made this when I was worse at the game and I have better understanding now, and I've never once consulted it anyway. But going through this quickly, the notes I have involving mod changes in the next campaign that will definitely be happening, I intend to install a Baby's Advent. That's a mod that makes prime reactions not happen, but you can configure it to only apply to some primes. My issue with primes is entirely that there are some primes that have a shitload of health. They can walk in from Fog of War, take 3 shots, and then kill your whole party. That's happened to me at least once this game. I'm still salty, Cell-Sectopod, I remember that. So my plan is to configure it to probably only apply to a couple of primes, likely Gatekeeper, which I never saw a Gatekeeper prime, Sectopod prime, maybe Andromeda prime. I don't quite remember how tanky they are. I think that one's appropriate. I don't know if any other primes are big enough. Maybe Berserker and Firestarter prime are big enough, but I want any really tanky prime to instead gain better stats and be more threatening. Oh, let me add a note here as well. Why does Berserker prime roll damage roulettes? Fix this. Just need to add that real quick, because 1 to 9 is not a reasonable damage to deal. I just forgot to write that down. Typically, I add these notes while I'm editing, and I haven't edited the past like 15 episodes of my campaign, so there's probably going to be more stuff that comes in this eventually. This is a minor thing. I've already fixed it on my local stuff, but I need to make the Warlock hat auto-equip cosmetic thing, where every time you put it on, they put on the ugly hat. I need to turn that off in my Tweaks mod. I need that to be a part of my campaign setup. Frost Legion and Bio Legion were meant to be the same thing, where they mostly showed up in theme pods originally. Then I found out that Bio Legion wasn't actually theme pods, it just lacked mod support. So I just gave it mod support, and now it's an integrated part of Advent. But Frost Legion really didn't have much support for other stuff. However, it does have some support, not really in the early game, but in the late game, you kept seeing like random Frost Legion stuff popping up. That's not me, that's base game Frost Legion support. So I either need to extend it so that it's integrated with Advent like Bio Legion is, or I need to strip out the original stuff so it only shows up in those theme pods. And I don't know which one I want, because showing up in theme pods, makes them easier to deal with because they're all in one place and weak to fire, whereas showing up individually might feel more sensible, or maybe it'll feel less sensible. I don't really know. I'm not decided yet, but one thing I am decided on is lower Frost Legion spawn rates. Frost Legion is just on the whole overrepresented, especially compared to Bio Legion. And Bio Legion, by the end of it, might have been underrated, or underweighted, rather. Another observation I had is Rift Keeper's too common and never saw Gatekeeper Prime. Those are definitely things that probably need to be noted and changed. This doesn't matter to me, but I should still do it. Okay, it's already listed. Nerf health and armor on Purge Priest units. It doesn't matter to me because I'm probably not running them in my next campaign, but it should be a part of my mod. They're just unreasonably tanky. I mostly dealt with them using Mind Control and Overdrive double Shred Storm Cannon. Like, the most broken shit in my campaign exclusively is how I dealt with them. They're ridiculous. I didn't want to nerf Venators right before Waterworld, but let me tell you, Venator shouldn't have 30 defense. That's just not reasonable. 20 is still really high. 20 is frankly outrageous for a unit that takes cover normally. The issue with 30 is that you'll have situations, I think it happened in the video, where you get like a flanking shot with a short range weapon and it's like an 80 to hit. It's something that's unacceptably low. So 30 is just too much. Even at 20, if they're in any amount of cover, you still need to use aim boosting abilities against them. Additionally, using aim boosting abilities even at 20 still helps. It removes the 10% to miss, and it's really, really valuable to not have that 10% to miss. It's really easy to find yourself in a spot where you're like, oh shit, I'm dead, when you rely on a 90% chance to kill a Venator. If that was your only plan, you're fucked. You still really want battle scanners and holo targeters. It's not a solid thing. Sorry, it's not a minor thing to have 20 defense. I think that's still enough to make them very tanky, especially in conjunction with their relatively high health and armor. And of course, this one was just added when I opened this up. I need to find a mod or figure out how to make a mod to make the reinforcement pods at the end of Waterworld not be 3 Mutons, 3 Faceless, 3 Vipers specifically. Because it's kind of funny how shit that is. Like, those are some of the weakest pods I've seen in the entire campaign. What are you talking about? There was like the pod with 4 fucking honor guards and the elite shield bearer. If every reinforcement pod had been like that, I'd have been like actually having serious wounds and losing people. That would have been stressful as hell. But instead, like, most of them were nothing. There was 1 or 2 that were kind of all right, and then most of them sucked and had like 1 random unit like the elite heavy or the Frost Codex. Most of them weren't really full pods. And I thought Golden Path would fix that. There's a mod called Golden Path Revamped. It integrates modded enemies into the story missions. And you can see that it definitely affected some of it, but most of those, I guess I would say about half of them, but about half of those pods were very clearly vanilla game walkover pods. And like, admittedly, in vanilla, it's arguably even easier. Like, yeah, you have 2 less soldiers, but you also have hail of bullets and saturation fire, so don't fucking lie to me and tell me it's hard. Like, the Waterworld was so anticlimactic. The first part was good. I think the first part might actually need a little bit more units on it. I think that's something I can configure with dynamic aiding against my force level relatively easily. Gotta go add that note as well. I think that's worth doing because if there was like 1 more enemy per pod, I think that would have just been fine, not too hard to deal with. Alternatively, we could just add more pods. I don't know how to do that. I'm an encounterless guy. I have never touched like mission schedules or set encounters. But my experience with Waterworld being a pretty severe anticlimax makes me want to figure out how to make a much more dramatic version of Waterworld. And there might just be a mod for this, right? This might already exist. Also, this notepad is not even close to done. I have it zoomed in because like my real and full name is on this because thanks, Windows. I'm glad that's just part of the taskbar trying to dox me for no reason. But there's a ton more in here. Going down to the next page of this, there's some stuff that I've already mentioned in the mod talk video. This is a fix for Bow Division that needs to go into my tweaks mod because all of my changes are supposed to eventually go there. This is just adding plus marks, by the way. Those are already, all of this is already in the file. And the plus marks shouldn't matter by my understanding. There should be no difference in just having it written or having a plus there. Apparently it matters for this. I don't know why, and it scares me. I think I've also mentioned this already. I want to reduce all living space by 5. I'm going to remove that question mark. The final 65 is too much, and by removing living space across the board instead of just from the end one, it makes you more stressed and more inclined to go for living space faster. Not that I don't already beeline living space. This is the crown change I was talking about earlier. This is how the hive guards get their deflect chance reduced to 1% instead of 25%. You can't ever get rid of it fully with I changes, unfortunately, because if you set the deflect chance to 0%, that sets it to 100%. It's a very funny prank. I've mentioned I'm planning on running phalanxes. I don't know if I've mentioned I'm planning on changing them heavily, just like you saw that little graph previously, or little table rather, words are hard. I have a lot of changes I'm planning on making to phalanxes. This one's not finalized yet. I think I was doing work to it and didn't really finish it, but I was like, this is good enough. I'll worry more once I'm done with the campaign. I'm going to boost their mobility by 2 from base 12 like everyone else to 14. This is because they're required to run shields, which give them -2 mobility. You can't really stand in front of your team and tank for them if you're slower than your team, which is why I think this is a necessary change. Their base aim scaling gives them 7 aim. Even medics get 10. Like, that's just weird, and 7's not an acceptable number. I'm sorry, I don't care if it has religious significance to some people. I don't care if you think it's lucky. I need round, even numbers. I'll take a multiple of 5. It doesn't have to be even, I guess. But 7 is not the correct number. I refuse to accept this. And it also includes several ranks like Squatty getting literally 0 aim. Part of this is because there is a proficiency perk that gives them some more aim because they're stuck with pistols, I think. I don't remember the specifics. But I don't care. I'm still going to set it to the lowest aim progression of any class rather than it's all in a super low, very weird scaling. A total of 3 more aim won't make a difference, but it will make my lizard brain happy. I can't talk at length about all the stuff I'm planning on changing here. Going by memory and assumptions, if it's black, then it's probably already there. Except for this one, which is black even though it shouldn't be. And by black, I mean bolded. This is Opportunist, Lock and Load, and Channeling Field all getting replaced with, respectively, Blast Padding, Reflex, and Combat Conditioning. And Aggression being replaced with Opportunist. I can't remember the specific reasons for these changes, because I also can't remember some of these abilities off the top of my head. Like, I don't know what Lock and Load is. Combat Conditioning is a generically good perk I like having available early on in some classes. Blast Padding should have been a tank ability. I think it was in the deck. Yeah, there's my explanation. Blast Padding is massively strong in core to class identity, move to main tree. Whereas things like Charge are strong but not related, so they can stay down here. And that note is made several times. Reflex, massively strong core to class identity, move to main tree. Hey, look at me making notes so future me can understand what the hell I was doing. This one is, I remember this, it's just not listed right. It doesn't actually generate in-game, easy to fix. But on the whole, relatively minor changes, the big changes being just having a couple of abilities I didn't like swapped out, and having some stuff that seemed mandatory to the class not be randomly rolled. Because, like, let's be honest, it doesn't really matter, but I don't like having to be like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not on the A team, you didn't roll Blast Padding 5 times before I get the phalanx that's allowed to be on the A team. It's a part of the game that I'm going to have to deal with because I optimize, so I'm going to look at the perks and be like, oh, hey, you didn't get Sprint. Did you know that having Sprint is the difference in whether or not you cast a Psionic spell this turn? And Psionic spells include Mind Control and Void Rift. You're not on the A team anymore. Like, that's how it goes. So when I have a tank character that's rolling to see if they're resistant to explosives and have extra armor, it's like, oh yeah, cool. That seems important. Guess if I'm doing A team optimization, I gotta throw 4 of you in the garbage. And while Sprint's not core to class identity, Blast Padding is. So, gotta go. And then there are a couple of random balance changes that have at some point been like, you know what we should do? We need to be in the same font as Notepad++. And I don't know when or why that happened, but here we are. I really like this final note. Just find a replacement for Solace. It's brick in the game. Like, yeah, that's a good summary of where I'm at emotionally today. I've mentioned before that I plan on replacing Splinter with Shredder. It was only even tolerable in my game because I have Weapon and Item Overhaul, but without that, I think it's a mandatory change. Just like I think Volatile Mix should still be available on Sappers, except rather than, you know, Sappers should scale up into the end game, it's like, how am I supposed to deal with all these modded enemies with tiny puny little baby Shredder instead of actual Shredder? I need actual Shredder. Do you see the Rift Keeper? It's coming. I need Shredder. Please give it to me. Now, for tech specialists, I made the note that I kind of want to replace their sniper rifles with normal rifles. I don't think I'm going to, because I understand the appeal of playing the tech specialist super differently and having the ability for squad sight. It seems interesting, but like, if I were going to put an aim PCS on my tech specialist and try to make him contribute on the A team, I would buy Shredder and Marauder and use a bullpup. I would never give him a sniper rifle. That's not the way I would do it. So while I don't like the sniper rifle and think the normal rifle would be a buff and it would give you a choice of do you want more damage or more mobility, I also don't think I'm going to do this, but it's a thought I've had in the past. And that's the exact same summary of the next choice with bullpups for skirmishers. Generally, I do feel like the skirmisher's bullpup is just a nerf to the class over a normal rifle. If you had access to both, it would give you a choice. Do you want to use a normal rifle and be better at range, or do you want more mobility for the ripjack? But as you're forced to pick one, and that's fair, all of the classes for hero classes are forced to use a normal weapon. They don't get a choice like the other classes. But since you're just forced into the bullpup, very frequently I found myself thinking, man, I wish this was a normal rifle. However, I think the ripjack is a core part of class identity. That shouldn't be a controversial statement, I think. And as such, being locked into the mobility gun does make sense, even if I often find myself wishing I weren't. Another balance thing I wanted to talk about is my overall impression of psionics and Psi Overhaul V3 from a balance perspective. I'm going to go into the Warlock's Crown after this. There should have been a note in that word pad about it, and I'm going to go ahead and add that as I talk about it, I think. But first, more generally on psionics, how do I feel about them? At first, I thought they were balanced and cool, and I gradually changed that to thinking they were comically busted. It's obviously power creep to give your characters access to abilities they otherwise wouldn't have had, just objectively stronger than they used to be. The thing is, the Scion is basically the strongest class in base XCOM 2. And even though my Templar has the most developed psionics and the highest Psi offense, they were typically my least effective Scion. Really being a Scion for them was about making it better that they didn't have a gun. My other three Scions that were dominant forces throughout the game all had access to different abilities that gave them mobility that a base game Psyop would never get. Adrenaline Rush on medics, Sprint on my A-Team sappers, Big Large, and Sonic Serenade. A Psyop in the base game cannot sprint forward, use stasis, and then mind control something. That is power creep over the base game. And this is going to be true with Psionics Ex Machina as well. That's absolutely true. However, Psionics Ex Machina limits you to like 2 to 5 abilities, I think, not much more than that. Additionally, your Psi offense score, I believe, caps out around 120, whereas that's the base Psi offense before the alien stuff is added on here. So my Psi offense numbers are also just really high compared to what you would see in Psionics Ex Machina. I don't think there's any additional cost because in Psionics Ex Machina, I'm planning on running my next campaign with the pistol slot mod, so Scions just give up their pistols, because I hate any system where you give up your secondary weapon to be a Scion, and the reason is pretty straightforward. That means that like half the classes in the game can't be Scion. Are you going to lie to my face and tell me that sappers can be Scions and they have to put the grenade launcher down to do it? Like, don't even start. So I don't really value that I can make it less good by replacing your secondary weapon. All that does is massively restrict which characters can actually be bothered to be a Scion. And it gets into really awkward stuff too, where like, yeah, your Marine can be a Scion. Shouldn't they be busy being a Marine? Like, their whole thing is they can shoot twice in one turn. Their actions, all of them, should be taken up already. They're not a class that wants to be a Scion, even though their weapon is spare to be replaced. So while I like the idea of this, I do think Psionics Ex Machina with pistol slot will be much, much more well-balanced than this is, with a much lower limit on how many abilities they can have, lower total Psi offense, and possibly most importantly, I hate this. I hate saying it's the most important part, but it is. The original reason I didn't use Psionics Ex Machina is because I don't like will as mana. If you don't know, every character has will. I'm sure you know that part. Every character has will. When you go into a mission, you lose will. Different things cause you to lose will, but as an example, every time you encounter an enemy in the mission, once it enters line of sight, you lose a little bit of will. That's why if you go on like the Forge and see 60 enemies, everyone's fucking tired immediately. Whereas if you go on an easy mission and someone's always out of position and never actually where they need to be to see the enemies, they're probably going to lose almost no will. Psionics Ex Machina has a very gamey system where you use will as mana, and that's how you power your abilities. And you get the ability when you have any sort of alien Psi-amp that you're able to drain will from enemies. And I'm just looking at it like, oh no, I'm a World of Warcraft warlock and I've got mana drain to get the mana to cast my spells. Oh no. It feels so painfully gamey to me. I'm not like a big immersion guy. I don't show cutscenes. I don't get in character. That's not how I work. Unless I'm playing a tabletop RPG, but that's like I'm there for the immersion. I do, however, have a threshold for immersion. I've never installed a Skyrim Dragons turned into Thomas the Tank Engine mod, even though I've modded the hell out of Skyrim, because I have a amount of immersion I require, and Psionics Ex Machina was originally too gamey for me. I've gotten over that. I think it was just an initial like, oh, I don't like that. And now that I've had time to mellow on it, it's like, yeah, whatever. It's gamey, but it's fine. It's going to be much, much more balanced than what I'm currently doing. Even if it might have some gaminess, I don't think it's enough to actually take me out of the system. So let's talk about the Warlock's Crown. But first, let's talk about how much I've nerfed it, because I don't remember the specifics. If you look at the basic Psi underlay, it doesn't give you any Psi. The Advanced gives you 20, and the Alien Psi underlay gives you 40. The Warlock's Crown gives you 80. I've nerfed it to 80. I thought it was 20, 40, 60. Oh, this one should be 80 then. So actually, I should have nerfed this all the way to 60. I didn't want to nerf it right before Waterworld. Same reason I didn't nerf the Venators. I just want to finish the game the way I've been playing it. Same reason I didn't nerf Sectopod Primes. But first of all, this should just be down to 60. And I'm going to figure out, I'm not going to change it down to 60 now. I'm going to figure out what the stuff is for Psionics Ex Machina and change it to match that. I think it's 0, 10, 20, so this would be 30. It might be 10, 20, 30, so this would be 40. But whatever it is, I'm going to put this one above Alien Psi underlay in the progression when I change that. It just gives you mind control. That's probably a bit much. What I'm going to do is change it to give you stasis. Because normally you randomly train into stasis, but with Pexum, that Psionics Ex Machina is much shorter acronym, which I'm going to be saying from here on out, because I've said it too many times already. With Pexum, you can just not do that, right? You can just not put the stasis gem in, so it's not a big deal. Additionally, it increases the damage of Null Lance and Soulfire. I don't think that's ever actually been too much of a problem. The damage increase is relatively minor. I still think I'd rather it just not touch that outright, but it's not a big deal. The big thing is that this should have been a lower Psi strength bonus, and that Mind Control was too strong of a perk to go on to this. Just definitively too strong. Oh, and also if you're wondering why everyone learned Domination but no one learned Mind Control in my game, that's a random roll. The base setup for Psi Overhaul V3 is that you will be able to learn either Domination or Mind Control. You'll never be able to get both. I didn't know this until I was looking into the code trying to troubleshoot things yesterday, but apparently that's why I never saw Mind Control as an ability I was able to learn. There's one more thing I want to mention before I wrap this up, and that's that I think originally in the last video when I was talking about the mod setup, I was like, I'm going to go down to 6-man maybe, I don't know, I'm not going to play on Legend or Covert Infiltration, I want the campaign to be faster. I think all of that was an intense bitterness caused by getting 82 episodes or whatever into a campaign and then having to call it there. I mean, seriously, Psyken's campaigns are finished before then. So when I'm playing for longer and then I have to brick it because of conflicts, it's just so frustrating. I think realistically, next time I play, it will still be on Legend. It will still be with Covert Infiltration, because I don't like playing at lower difficulties. It makes me feel less accomplished when I win, and I don't like playing without Covert Infiltration because it does just genuinely make the game much, much more complex and interesting. One change I will make to shorten the campaign, however, because I do think this campaign went on too long, and a lot of that was just at the very end when I had to be like, I'm going to Waterworld soon, but the dark events are a problem. What if they just weren't? What if I didn't play with permanent dark events? Like, I know Grim Horizon is cool and it adds stuff to the game, and it also spams you with covert ops that I don't want to do. If I wanted to get rid of that dark event, I would have just stopped it in the first place, right? And at the end of the game, you end up in a situation where you're playing many, many more missions just because the dark events are permanent. If I know I'm not going to Waterworld for 2 months, I don't need to stop dark events this month. They'll go away, it's fine. But instead, I have to stop basically all of them. And if I were instead allowed to not frantically try to stop every dark event every month of the game and play a few less missions, and if I were allowed to not have a roster of 50 guys and just get away with having a roster of 35 because I don't have to do all the missions, and at the end of the game I stopped doing missions earlier, I think it's fair to say that on the whole, Grim Horizon probably end up making me play like another 10 to 20 episodes of this game for dark event management. Not to mention made me troubleshoot an extra hour because I kept having to stop dark events yesterday when I was rebuilding these Scions, but that's not really the point. I will probably play without permanent dark events just because it makes the game much smoother to play, especially in the end game. I don't think permanent dark events really add that much. But I'm definitely going to continue playing on Covert Infiltration and Legend. I'm not going to continue playing for a while, although I do have a lot of mod updating I want to do before I stop focusing on XCOM. Odds are I won't play XCOM for a couple of months, like 6 months at least. And when I do make the next XCOM campaign, it's probably going to be like someone else started an XCOM campaign and I got hyped. Like there's a new Psychic campaign, or the fabled Christopher Odd Season 8 comes out. But like what's likely going to happen is somebody makes XCOM 2 content, I see it, I get hyped, I start making XCOM 2 content. But I have a lot of stuff I want to do other than XCOM, and since it's like not 9 months, since it's like 90 days or 3 months per campaign by the looks of it, I would rather take a good long break from XCOM. I can't see myself committing to do that more than once a year at absolute most. Speaking of the mods I'm planning on doing as I wrap up this campaign, like all the notes I've just been showing, one thing I might do is make a separate tweaks mod just for the proficiency changes I make to classes. I don't know if I need to do that. I don't think I do. I might though. Because as I start making more and more tweaks, the tweaks mod gets bigger and bigger. And there might be people who play with Proficiency class back and they won't buy tweaks for that. And they don't give a shit about all this other nonsense that I'm doing. And sure, they can just like copy it, steal it, make a local file out of it. But I think generally, like the whole reason my stuff is segmented is so that you can take what you care about and not be bothered with the rest of it. You can play my 8-man setup without having to run my exact setup with all of my tweak mods. You can use my enemy patches without having to use all of the enemies. If there's something where you're not even touching overhauls, then you don't need to mess with that one. So in the name of segmenting files out better, I might start looking at tweaks as like the campaign meta mod and make a proficiency balance adjustment mod, because now I've like reworked the Sapper minorly, filled out decks very differently from the full decks mod that does exist. I'm making changes to phalanxes, and I definitely have to make my own mod full stop for the bastardization Franken field class, the support medic that I'm going to be doing. And I think the way I plan on doing that is just by directly editing either the field support or field medic and having it come with a configuration to make the other class not spawn using pick your classes. But I have a lot of mod work I want to do while I'm still passionate about XCOM. And then when I finish doing it, I'll fucking hate XCOM and not want to look at it ever again, just like last time I worked on the encounter list. So I need to do that now while I'm passionate enough to care and not looking to play it in the near future. But for now, I think I'm done talking about XCOM. It's been fun though. Very sincerely, thank you to everyone who's watched this series, especially the rare few of you that have made it this far into this video. Thank you, the support means a lot to me. A massive shout out to the XCOM modding Discord, who has had countless people help me with countless problems. The most prominent ones are definitely Iridar, Rusty, and now Exit Sign. Iridar and Rusty are just like pillars in the modding community, and Exit Sign took it upon themselves to personally save my campaign, so like, that counts for a lot to me. Very grateful to those three in particular for various things about the campaign. And I guess I should shout out Tedster specifically for saving me like 2 hours yesterday, being like, oh hey, you think it's Scions? Probably Solace then. Because that saved me a lot of time. I would not have figured out it was specifically Solace for a while. But thank you to the entire modding community at large, not just the Discord, for all the mods that made this campaign what it were. All of the mods that made this campaign what it was. And one last thank you to Jeffrey B, who, recording this 2 weeks in advance, you never know, might not be my only Patreon supporter anymore. Probably, but a man can hope. And I know anyone here is here because they're a huge fucking fan of XCOM, but hopefully, whatever the next one is, I'll still see you in it anyway.